Alright guys, TacticalRab here, and I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Major rumours emerging overnight that Cloud9, a huge esports organisation that's been out of Call of Duty since the end of the Jetpack era, is looking to get back into the CDL in some form or another. But this is not expansion, this is not taking over one of the poverty organisations of the CDL. This is a partnership and then acquisition of apparently the New York Subliners. What does this mean for the state of the league? What they might do with these players? The Esports World Cup for HyDra, for example, given all the talk about his contract status, given other actions that are going on right now in the league. Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. So much to dive into today, and to be honest, I'm just going to dive straight into this Cloud9 stuff because there was a huge storyline last night after the rumours started to emerge. So Sheep Esports, I think, Wooloo, right, basically League of Legends reporter, started this whole Sheep Esports thing. It was a pretty funny day, to be fair. But yeah, they have sources implying that Cloud9 is set to return to Call of Duty. Now, we'll talk in a few minutes as to what Cloud9 were up to back in the day, because if you guys have been around several years, you'll remember when Cloud9 were in the league and a few of the, well, very dramatic storylines that they were involved in. But today, we're talking about a Subliners, not even just partnership initially, but actual straight-up acquisition, which is a really big deal, given how much of a stable team Subliners have seemed like they have been. If you look at the organizations in the league, there's a few, OpTic, your FaZes, theoretically a team like Thieves, Toronto and others that, don't seem like they're going to be going anywhere. New York Subliners was kind of in that category, right? They've invested heavily. They won the World Championship last year, including multiple events. They've been an org that's been around for the last few years, no changes, right? There's not even that many organizations that were in the league in 2019 or 2020 when the CDL started that are still the same org. Like, the majority of these teams have changed in some sense. Florida Mutineers and now Miami Heretics. Boston weren't even there at the start. Even to be fair, Thieves weren't there at the start. There's been chopping and changing. Obviously, Paris, it became Vegas, Ravens, Carolina, all this stuff that's happened over the last few years. Subliners have at least been stable in that sense. But maybe not for too much longer. Now, to be fair, for New York, behind the scenes, things have been a bit more complicated. The NY Excelsior, NYXL, Ansbox, they had all sorts of different parts of their business that were kind of getting consolidated to some degree. But this is what the article has to say. Cloud9 are about to open a new chapter in their history, and Cloud9, massive org, right? I mean, massive North American organization. The success they've had in multiple different esports is, a big deal, and it seems like this is to some degree Esports World Cup inspired. They are entering a partnership with the Subliners Call of Duty team. That is the plan for now, especially come the Esports World Cup in August in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Cloud9 exited the Call of Duty scene in 2017. We'll get back to that in a second. The short-term objective is to enable Cloud9 to increase its presence at the Esports World Cup. By participating in the Modern Warfare 3 tournaments, Cloud9 has strengthened its presence in the esports landscape by competing now in all these other games. And, this is part of the reason why the Esports World Cup is a rather big deal. Then the big question, though, is, because, sure, that's going to be happening, and that's a big deal, and we'll get onto why that's a big deal in a second. But what does it mean for next year, right? In terms of, do the Subliners still exist? In a second phase, a merger acquisition of NYXL, who are owned by Sterling VC, owner of the New York Mets and MLB, is expected to follow. Therefore, the Los Angeles-based team, i.e. Cloud9, should remain in 2025 in the new Call of Duty League format, welcoming certain changes recently announced by Activision, right? So, of course, we've seen all of that that's happened, the changes of the franchise structure. This, I think, was inevitable as soon as they refunded the teams and said, okay, the franchise league has effectively failed in some sense, we're going to give you the money back. Those spots are, in some sense, no longer worth anything. There's no longer like a $25 million price tag on the spot that nobody's going to pay to buy it because it obviously wasn't worth that amount. Now the spot is, maybe it's worth something, but it's effectively, worth zero, really. I think even there's some sort of operating arrangement that the teams are going to have with the league going forwards. But ever since that was confirmed by the league, the immediate rumours were about the possibility of organisations taking over existing CDL teams. And that, it seems, is exactly what is happening here. So before we get into what it means for next year year's CDL, what does it mean for the short term, the Esports World Cup stuff? Because the initial plan is to increase the presence at the Esports World Cup. And this is the point that you've got to understand, is that the Esports World Cup is a big deal for these teams. You know, these organizations, if you look around the world, where's the money coming from in terms of esports, sports, entertainment? It's coming from Saudi Arabia. And these organizations, some of which have been highly irresponsible with some of their VC money over the last several years, and maybe will continue to be so, you know, there's new money sources coming through. And as a result, these organizations, not just Cloud9, many other organizations as well, want to become and remain a strong partner of the Esports World Cup. And that is true for Cloud9, it's true for other organizations as well. They've been invited, Cloud9, which not many other organizations have been from the Call of Duty world. KOI are going to be there, they're partnered to some degree with Toronto. G2 are going to be there, they're basically Minnesota Rocket now, but that relationship is kind of what this relationship is going to be for the World Cup, the G2 Rocket thing, where it's still Minnesota Rocket in the COD League, but yet, you know, they're probably going to represent G2 at the Esports World Cup. That is likely what's going to happen into Cloud9. But also Call of Duty is just generally a pretty attractive esport, I think, to get into at the moment. Big North American presence, lots of buzz around it, great personalities, and, you know, obviously I'm biased, right? But I think that there's been interest from Cloud9 and TSM and other organizations, I don't know about Liquid, but, you know, orgs like that were in COD in the past to get back in. There's been lots of talk circulating around this for some time, and now the Call of Duty League dropped the announcement on the changes to the franchise structure, and then bang, Cloud9 are coming in. Cloud9 even basically teased that, yeah, this is happening. They put this on their timeline yesterday to basically say, yeah, like, you know, watch this space type thing. So before we get into what it means for next year's league, what does it mean in terms of the history of this organization? How good might they actually turn out to be? Because, you know, these are some of the teams they're putting together back in the day. You know, some legendary lineups here, I'm not gonna lie. Not the best teams ever, of course. Famously, Eggs ended up joining Cloud9 at the end of the Black Ops 3 season. Now, look at this Call of Duty World League. I love it. But this was just, for example, I just threw in like OpTic versus Cloud9. The Cloud9 camo as well in the game in Black Ops 3 was like one of the best, if not the best. And, you know, OpTic Dynasty versus the Cloud9 team at the time. These were their results, by the way. So, you know, that was the team, by the way, of Llama Guards, I think, yeah, Happy, right? So that's Pseudo or whatever he also used to go by. He actually was on the Subliners, if you guys remember this, back in the Modern Warfare 19 season, when there was all this drama around the Subliners roster making changes. Doug, who was on the bench, he was trying to finesse a spot on the starting lineup, and Zero was like bench of the team, whatever it was, and Happy was the man, because he was good friends with Accuracy, basically, who got put onto the roster instead. Doug weren't very happy about it. So it's kind of coming full circle in a sense that, you know, he was on Cloud9, then of course he joins York Subliners and played for them briefly, and now it seems those two organizations are going to come together. These were their results. Not the best, to be fair, but when Cloud9 came in, these are just the actual pro kind of tournament results that I filtered by. But yeah, so MLG Anaheim top 8, Stage 2 playoffs top 8, then they made a roster change. Then towards the World Championship, of course, they brought in that team of Assault Aches, Lacefield and Ricky, that famously knocked out OpTic Gaming from the losers bracket of that tournament. Next year, they kept the same roster, came second at the first event, the Las Vegas Open, then Priestahh joins, and they made a couple of changes. They came fourth at Anaheim, which was respectable actually at the time, and then World Championship was not good. That was their run in COD history, Cloud9, and it was an attractive time to come into COD. After this, though, they exited the scene. They weren't really sure it was the place to be because, you know, the previous year, as I said, we had teams like Liquid, teams like TSM, you know, big orgs involved in COD. A lot of them dipped out in this period because they just, you know, they were attracted to get into the space, but they couldn't make it work. They made poor decisions, their rosters were bad, and it wasn't clear that it was going to be, you know, making a lot of sense elsewhere, especially because, you know, Counter-Strike was on the come up and therefore organizations focused on that a little bit more rather than the Call of Duty stuff. ReeaL, coach of the team, says 5 gifted right now, and I'll spill what the beef is. So it's a big question as to exactly what's happening here, what the next steps are going to be. But I'm really fascinated by what this means for next season, right? Because we've also got to understand the Esports World Cup is not going away. If these organizations such as Cloud9 and others that are going to be at the Esports World Cup want to maintain that presence there, they will likely need to try and start acquiring teams in multiple different esports, certainly the big ones that are going to be at the Esports World Cup. That has probably pushed Cloud9 in this particular direction. But for next year, does it just become Cloud9? Do the New York Subliners continue to exist? this is my question, and as far as I'm concerned, it's only a matter of time until the city-based branding in the league disappears. I don't see why it's necessary. I don't see how in the longer term this makes any real sense to continue in this way, because the franchise league is not over precisely, but the teams are getting refunded. It's, you know, to some degree an admission from Activision Blizzard that the decision they made to franchise league in the way that they did was not a good one. There's been talk from other organizations, even Toronto, and Toronto have done a great job, I think, from their regionalization perspective. But let's say Toronto were just to become ultra and they were no longer city tied. I don't think esports need to be city tied. Isn't that the entire point? Some organizations have done well with the in-city based stuff, and I think that there is something to be said for having a team, you know, having a location in a city where they are based out of and do activations in. I don't think that's necessarily a mandatory thing for the league itself. I think it's cool that OpTic do stuff in Dallas, that obviously the Rocket team does stuff in Minnesota and activates that local fan base. It's kind of cool to see that in Toronto, there are people out there that, you know, they're sports fans and they like Call of Duty and they're like, okay, which team should I follow? And therefore they follow the Toronto COD team. Like, that is cool. And that, you know, is a benefit of what we have seen over the last couple of years. But I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's for the best of the scene to maintain this. I would love to go back to a world where we simply have OpTic Gaming, FaZe Clan, 100 Thieves, rather than all the city-based stuff. Maybe a controversial take, but I think most would probably agree with me on that. So my question is, does it remain the Subliners? Because if I'm Cloud9, I'm partnering with New York, and I'm probably going to take them over and own them, like, entirely. Do I really want to be Cloud9 and have the team of 4 playing under Cloud9 for one event a year at the Esports World Cup, and for the rest of the year, they play under the New York Subliners, an entirely different branding, even if I rebrand it to the New York, you know, like Skyliners or I don't know, whatever, like something cloud related. Like, it's still not really going to be great, is it? Maybe it gets the picture across to some degree, but I'm pretty sure the organizations, they want to have one brand, ideally. Like, they would, I'm sure Cloud9 want to just be Cloud9 again in the league as they were 7 years ago when they left the league the last time. So I don't know if that's going to happen yet, but I feel like it's surely a conversation that Cloud9 will be having with the league to say, hey, we just want to be Cloud9. Like, we don't want to be New York, whatever. Like, we're not even based in New York. What are you talking about? Like, do we have to move it to LA? But there's already LA teams there. Like, it's an absolute mess, isn't it? So, you know, I think that the league and the teams might come to an agreement to say, hey, if you guys want to keep the city name, go for it. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And, like, OpTic can go back to OpTic Gaming, FaZe Clan, as I say, Cloud9. And then other organizations, again, might be really tempted because, you know, did TSM or other orgs want to come in feeling like they've got to keep a city-based thing in there? Maybe not. So I think that's something to look for going forward. The other question I have is the fact that it's the Subliners in general. I would really have liked to see New York maybe stay and Cloud9 buy out or acquire, whatever, a Vegas Legion, a Los Angeles Guerrillas, you know, a London Royal Ravens, one of the poverty orgs, you know, one of the organizations that's on the cusp of not being in the league anymore. I will say on this news, what about the other organizations that are heavily involved at EWC? What about Team Falcons, right? Those guys, okay, they have a COD team, but there's been rumors about discussions for years between Team Falcons and the Saudis and getting involved in Call of Duty. What if they come along and say, hey, we want to buy out the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and they get the deal done? Do they want to have, you know, the LA Falcons or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't want to be that. They want to be Team Falcons in the league like everyone else is in all the other leagues. So, yeah, just something to think about. The other point that I would make, of course, is on HyDra. What does it mean for the contractual side of this discussion? HyDra's on a big deal. We're pretty sure that his deal runs beyond this year. We don't think he's an entirely unrestricted free agent going into next season. That means he's going to have offers, but it means that they can keep him contracted. And if Cloud9 are getting involved, you know, they may be giving HyDra the mega bag and trying to really build a great team around him. Or potentially the contracts might be not exactly void, but there might be, given the transition period, an opportunity for someone to swoop in as Cloud9 do a full rebuild. But yeah, big questions for you guys to consider in the comments section below. Very much intrigued to your thoughts as always down there. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.